So hello guys and welcome to another video. My name's Mark, I'm an entrepreneur and property investor, and in today's video we're talking about the 7 baby steps as per Dave Ramsey. So stay with me through this. I'm going to give you all the psychology, all the reasons behind it. I'm going to review each one, and I'm also going to give you my personal thought process when it comes to investment percentages and debt. But before we get into the video, as always, if you could possibly give it a big like, massively helps me out with the algorithm. And remember, we don't charge and we don't upsell any courses, so there's no incentive for me to hold any information back whatsoever. And if you haven't already subscribed, why not consider subscribing? We release a video every Monday, Wednesday and Friday with the sole aim of trying to empower you with as much information so that you can make better financial decisions. Let's get into the video. Let's start talking about Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps. Now, for anybody who doesn't know who Dave Ramsey is, he's a big protagonist for living completely debt-free. And a lot of people in the FIRE community follow him. In today's video, I'm going to be giving my opinion as somebody who's got a lot of debt and somebody who's got a big property portfolio. You know, I've got £3 million worth of property and I've got about £1.7 million worth of debt. So I guess I sit on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to these opinions. That said, I do find a lot of validity in these steps for the right sort of person. So in this video, I'm going to explain the mindset behind it all, the psychology, my opinion, and also what I think I would change about my journey when I look at this plan. So guys, stick with me. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. What do we reckon? Is that better? I mean, I got very big, didn't I? Maybe I'll go a little bit less. Yeah, that's all right. So guys, let's get into the video. Number 1, the first baby step, you've got to save a £1,000 emergency fund. Actually, it's a $1,000 emergency fund. Because Dave Ramsey is very much specifically looking at America, I'm going to convert this to the UK. You could say £750, but £1,000 still seems reasonable. And why does he say that you should save up a £1,000 emergency fund? Clearly, for most people, when an emergency happens, you lose your job, something like that, £1,000 is just not going to cut it. Well, it's because it gets a win early in my mind. It gets that psychology of ticking off targets nice and quickly. And as we roll through all of this plan, I think you're going to find that there is a significant weighting to the psychology of winning that goes through all of this. And that's why, for example, when we get to pay off debt, he uses the debt snowball rather than the debt avalanche. And I'll explain both of those to you and the benefits to both and why I think he's chosen to use the debt snowball. Now, in terms of save $1,000, he says it should only take you 30 days. He says you should be on rice and beans, you should sell whatever you need to, get rid of anything that means that you're going to, within 30 days, have £1,000 sat in your bank account. And I think if I was starting from scratch and I was going to be following this plan, I would find no issue with doing that. I mean, ultimately, you could go out and get a second job. There's lots of things you could do to make sure that £1,000 is ticked off nice and early. Now, step 2 on this is to pay off all debt. Now, he uses what's known as the debt snowball. And what we'll do is we'll just write it down here, DS. And I'll write a quick example of what that might be. Let's say, for example, you've got 3 debts. One is £1,000, and that is at 10% APR. One is £10,000, and that is at 0% APR, and that's a car loan, let's say. And the last one is £20,000, and that one is at 20% APR. Now, what Dave Ramsey's debt snowball would do is it would mean that you put everything on the minimum and you target the lowest amount first. And then once you've got rid of that, you attack the next lowest and then the next lowest, regardless of APR. Now, anybody who's watching this who's just got a basic understanding of maths will understand that if you do that, you're going to end up paying more interest. And I completely agree. However, I also can see the psychology behind it. The psychology is it's going to take you less time to get that £1,000 dealt with nice and quickly. So if your objective is to pay off all your debt, it's going to feel good getting rid of the first one. You're going to be able to roll on to the next one with a lot of enthusiasm. Now, things like car loans, I think that's really interesting. He says you should never buy a car that's more than half your annual salary. And you should always pay cash. Now, am I going to agree with that? No. As an entrepreneur, I understand the value of debt. I understand when I'm growing businesses, when I'm buying property, I need debt personally because I'm never going to have enough capital just by myself to achieve what I want to achieve. However, I do also see the validity in this because some people go out and overextend. I know people who earn £30,000 a year and they've got £40,000 cars cars. I mean, that to me seems crazy. They didn't pay cash, absolutely not. They got it on a PCP agreement, and suddenly £300 a month seems reasonable. Of course it's not. It's a huge amount of your income. So I think, again, by putting these rules in place, what he really is doing is creating an environment in which people who maybe struggle with spending and debt have now got a fixed, rigid set of rules which they can stick to, and then objectives that they can get through nice and quickly to improve their financial health. And frankly, if you've got these debts and you're earning £30,000–40,000 a year, then you get rid of all these debts, you are going to feel a lot richer. Of course you are. So he says, number 2, you should pay off all debt except your mortgage, and that should take you 2 years on average. And again, he's saying you're on rice and beans, you're working extra jobs, you're taking extra shifts, you're doing whatever it takes to make sure you get that ticked off in 2 years. Let's look up what the average UK household debt is quickly, just to get an idea of what it would take in the UK. UK average, excluding mortgages. Okay, so I found a few different sources. This one seems pretty good. Look, it says, current average UK debt, oh, it's going to look terrible. Doesn't matter. Trust me, it's £7,800 is the current UK average debt per capita on loan agreements, excluding mortgages, okay? So £7,800 is the average per capita. So you can imagine that being a couple of grand here, 1 grand there, 6 grand here, and then suddenly you've got your 8 grand or something like that. 5 grand here. My basic maths eludes me. But you can see how the debt snowball effect would take place. You'd get rid of the one that was 1,000 first, then you get rid of the one that was 2,000, then you'd finally tick off the one that was 5,000, and you would have completed stage 2. Now, it completely disregards some of my rules, which is if I can borrow for a purchase that I was going to make anyway, at less than 10% interest rate, which is roughly what I will get from index funds, and if you want to say 8 and if you want to say 11, absolutely fine, as long as I can make more than I can borrow at, then I would always take credit. So for example, my bed, I was going to buy it anyway from Dreams. It was about £2,000. I got it on 0% APR. I could either pay £2,000 or I could borrow £2,000 and invest the £2,000. So for me, as an entrepreneur and investor, that would be the choice that I would make. However, what I do think this is really useful for is I think people go and make these purchases when they weren't going to buy a new bed. They make impulse purchases. They buy things that they might otherwise not be able to afford. A £2,000 bed is a lot, and I saw a lot of people buying these sort of beds on credit while I was there. I'm not convinced everybody there should have been buying a £2,000 bed. That said, that's the way that I look at it. Dave Ramsey, pay off all the debt, get rid of all the debt. And I can see the validity for a lot of people in that. Now let's talk about the next one. We're talking about saving 3 to 6 months as an emergency fund. This is step 3. So far you're 2 years, 1 month in, roughly, on average. You're completely debt-free. At this point, you should be saving 3 to 6 months expenses as an emergency fund. And if I'm honest, in my bank account, there's probably about 4 or 5 months. About that. So that's roughly what I keep back. Obviously I have assets that I could also sell. I have liquid assets. I also have illiquid assets. So an example of liquid assets would be our ISAs. We've got 6 figures in our ISAs and fund and share accounts. However, we've also got £3 million worth of property. This would be an illiquid asset. We couldn't sell this tomorrow. Our ETFs we could sell and withdraw tomorrow. So we have liquid and illiquid, and what he's saying, you should keep 3 to 6 months as an emergency fund in your savings account or bank account so that you know whatever life throws at you, you've got some cash beside to deal with it. I think that's a very worthy goal, something that helps people sleep at night, myself included. Number 4, invest 15% into retirement using funds. Now, I'm not going to be a fan of this because I believe in being wealthy earlier. However, I can see that if you're somebody who maybe struggles with investing, and for example, maybe you're somebody who might reach 10 grand and then spend it, might reach 5 grand and then spend it. I know people who, have worked with me in the past, and I've spoken to friends and family, and they've got to a target and they've spent it on something completely irrelevant. I know one guy who got to 15,000, was looking to buy his first property. He needed to save up about 20 because he was going to use the Help to Buy scheme. And that was his objective. It might not be what I would do, but that was his objective. He got to 15,000 and he decided to spend it. And he literally went on holiday, bought a bike, bought a motorbike, and it was all gone. And that was 2 years of hard work. For someone like that, maybe investing 15% into retirement would be good, because he couldn't do that. He would have to have it locked away until he was 55. Now, using index funds, I think Dave Ramsey says mutual funds, and index funds are a type of mutual fund. I would always recommend index funds. There's lots and lots of evidence to why index funds outperform generally over the long run to actively managed funds. So I suggest you can do your own research on that, and I've done other videos on that, but my personal preference is global index funds. So 15% into retirement, I can see that anybody who follows this, frankly, if in 2 years you've got rid of all your debt and you've got no payments going out apart from your mortgage or potentially your rent, you've now got your emergency fund so you can sleep well at night, and you're investing 15% of an average salary, which, I don't know, in the UK is about 30,000, so we're talking about £300 a month being invested after tax. You are going to struggle to not be wealthy by the time you retire. You're going to struggle to mess this up. I can see why this plan works, because it's very, very systematic, and you're going to struggle to mess it up. In fact, he's even taking away your ability to mess it up by making sure it's in your retirement plans. Myself, I'm in ISAs. ISAs allow me the flexibility. It also allows me to be rich now rather than later. Number 5, save for your children's education. I think a worthy goal. Again, in the UK, higher education is not free. The children have to pay to go to university, which actually, to be honest, I think they should. It's a service, it's a product. If you want to use it, you should have to pay for it. It does have an advantage at the end if you use it correctly. But again, he says don't set your children up for failure. Don't let them come out of university with 30 grand's worth of debt. I think that's a worthy goal. Number 6, pay off your home as early as possible. And Dave Ramsey would always say 15-year mortgages. You should aim to have that done in 15 years. Number 7, build wealth and give generously. So what are my thoughts of this plan? And as somebody with a lot of debt, what does this make me feel like? Well, I feel like if I had followed this plan, I wouldn't be anywhere near as wealthy as I am today. Ultimately, I would never have borrowed this money to buy these properties. I would never have got all of that debt over there. I've borrowed significant money in my businesses in order to be able to scale my businesses. So one side of me says, this is a terrible plan if you want to become incredibly wealthy. The other side of me says, for lots of people, going to struggle to get past that £10,000–15,000 of savings. They're going to struggle with debt their entire life. So for a lot of people, this is going to be a really good plan, and the psychology behind it, I can understand. Now, some people are going to struggle with this pay off all debt using the Snowball method, paying the lowest one first and working your way up. But I think it's genius. I genuinely do. I think that means you get wins nice and early, and ultimately, although you might pay a couple of £100 extra in interest, you're going to feel good as you do it. Your motivation's going to stay with you, and you're going to get to the end goal. I think that that's going to be better than attacking this £20,000 straight away and then struggling to get through that. It's going to take you years. You need to get some wins early psychologically, especially if you're somebody who has struggled with debt, because I think generally speaking, you're probably buying for now rather than investing for the future. So you've got that sort of personality anyway. You need some wins now. So I think that's absolutely genius. Emergency fund, completely agree with it. If you're, again, somebody who struggles with debt, struggles with investing, you're gonna need to lock it away in retirement so that you can't access it, you can't spend it on the holiday, you can't start acting once you've got 30 or 40,000 pounds together like you're a baller and buy a Rolex. You're not. You're still, quite frankly, until you get between 1 and 10 million, you're still very much at the bottom rung, in my opinion. And it's not until you get to 10 million plus, and I know people who are like myself, who've got net worth of a few million, and then people who've got 20, 30, 40 million, there's a big difference. There is a very, very big difference. So my personal aim is to make sure I get my net worth well over that 10 million as soon as I possibly can. And if you're somebody who struggles with debt and struggles with investing, retirement plans are probably the best place for your money. Using index funds, of course, save for children's education. Everybody wants the best for their children. Pay off your home. I mean, why not? At the end of the day, it's going to allow you to invest more money. And we are using a debt-free kind of ethos here. We're not using let's leverage up and build wealth and give, of course. So my personal thought is, for me, it doesn't make any sense, because ultimately, I run a completely different formula, which is if the investment is greater than debt So I've just written a different formula up here. My personal formula is if my investment percentage weighted for risk, i.e. taking into consideration risk, is greater than the debt percentage, then I would take on debt to fund that investment. That's my personal formula. But I can totally understand the value that Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps are going to take for some people. And I'm going to be so crass as to say probably for the majority of people. But guys, let me know down in the comments, let me know your thoughts on this video. It's a different type of video for me because I'm reviewing somebody else's plan rather than talking about what's going on in my life. And if you haven't already subscribed, why not consider subscribing? As you know, we post every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and I'll see you on the next video.